Getting to Work is the podcast of NCI Works. I'm John Spencer, your host from Starbuck Media. Our guest today is one of our favorite guests of all time. In fact, I think maybe so far our only three-time returning guest, Brian.
Wow. All right. Well, I appreciate you having me. I have a great time every time. I'm happy to come back for a fourth if you want
Well, let's get through three first. Let's see how you do.
it.
All right.
I'm ambitious. I'm sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself, getting over my skis too far.
Brian, for those of you who don't know, is a certified mental performance consultant, a keynote speaker, stuntman, stunt coordinator, author, and high stakes performance whisperer. Did I miss anything?
That's a good place to start for sure.
we Brian can talk about all sorts of things when it comes to performance, and he's got a great story about how he, dropped out of school to become a stuntman, and then, went back and became a doctor. And I don't use that in quotes because it's fake, because you are a PhD doctor, but just great story, and always a fun time when Brian visits. And we are going to put him under a little stress and pressure today, talking about pressure and stress, because it seems like a lot of us are under a lot of stuff right now as we start 2025. And basically, Brian, you say it's all in our head, right?
Yeah, I mean that's really what it comes down to, and we can just cut it right there. Yeah, pressure exists in the mind, not in the moment, and that's something important to remember because it's interesting. It was probably about a year ago or so. I was talking to somebody, and for whatever reason, it happened to click in a certain way this time. They said, you know what, you got to perform well under pressure, or we got to do well in pressure situations, or something like that came up, and again, I've heard that it's a ubiquitous idea that there are these pressure situations and that we need to perform well under pressure. But for whatever reason, it hit me differently at that time. And I started to think about it a little bit. And I realized I don't think that that's true. I don't think either of those things is true. I don't think that there's such a thing as a pressure situation. And I don't think that we need to perform well under pressure. I think we need to eliminate pressure in whatever situation we happen to be in. So, and this isn't a new idea, by the way. This goes back 2,000 years at least to the Stoic philosophers. I mean, Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, both said it's not events that disturb us; it's how we think about the events. So it's not a situation that's a pressure situation. It's just a situation, and we're either experiencing pressure or not. So then the question becomes, okay, well, what is it that's contributing to this pressure? What is it that's creating it? What's the genesis of this feeling that I'm having? Because it is a very real feeling. And as I started to think about it and read about it and really reflect on my own experiences in high stakes environments through stunts and in the work that I did with the military, et cetera, I realized pressure comes when our focus is on the consequences of what's about to happen. So we're in this situation, the stakes are high, the ramifications of doing well or not are important. And if our focus is on those consequences, meaning if this goes badly, then fill in the blank, or even if this goes well, then fill in the blank. If that's where my attention is, that's where pressure starts to come in. I start to think about, well, it's an imagination. I start to imagine those consequences that could maybe possibly occur in the future. Now, they may be very probable consequences. If I screw this up, then I may be able to predict those consequences very well. But the issue is where my attention is in that moment, because in order for us to perform as well as we possibly can, our attention needs to be in the moment on those task relevant things that if we do them, we are creating conditions that allow us to make it more likely that we'll achieve the outcome that we're hoping to achieve. So if we're experiencing pressure, for me, that's a red flag that I'm paying attention to the wrong thing. I'm paying attention to what I think might happen after it's all over, when what I really need to be paying attention to is what's happening right now in this moment. So that's pressure. And we can break that down a little bit more before we get into stress if you want to, or however it is. But it really was a realization that kind of came out of nowhere. And as I started to check it against my own experiences, I realized, I mean, for example, there was a job that I was working on. It was a TV show, and the stunt was I was supposed to get thrown out the back of this truck, hit the ground, and roll while the truck was driving down the street. And prior to that stunt, I remember being being on the side and experiencing a huge amount of pressure. Man, I can't screw this up. I don't want to get hurt. I don't want to make the stunt coordinator look bad. There are all these other stunt guys out there watching me. I don't want to look bad in front of them. It may screw up my career. And then I realized too that the flip side was also the case. If I hit this, if I do this really well, if I show these guys what I can do, I may end up on the next big movies. This may help my career. I may move forward. Either way I went, I was still experiencing the pressure. Well, cut to
And
about, I don't know.
both of those are really dangerous things that take you away from what you really need to be focusing on, which is just being in the moment and doing it, right?
Exactly. Exactly. My mind was focused on all the consequences that could go along with doing it well or not, as opposed to paying attention to what I needed to do in that moment to succeed. And then, again, it was about 3 months ago. I did almost the same stunt. It was on a show called The Righteous Gemstones. And there I was again in the back of this truck's driving down this road, and I come out the back of it, hit the ground, roll. But prior to that stunt, I felt no pressure. And that's what I mean by there aren't any pressure situations. I mean, I would if there is such a thing as a pressure situation, I would think that driving in a truck and coming out the back of it and hitting the road would qualify, right? And it did in one situation, but it didn't in another. And that, so again, it begs the question, well, why in one case and not the other? And that's what got me thinking. And it got me to realize that in that first situation, I really was fixated on those consequences. Whereas the second one, I was just enjoying the moment. I was paying attention to my position in the car, where my hand needed to be to flip this latch thing, the way I was going to come out, the way I was going to hit, that just all the things that I needed to do in order to execute that safely. That's where my attention was. And that was truly the difference. One, I felt pressure, the other I didn't. Same identical situation.
So what did you do differently? Well, the first time, obviously, to settle yourself down, but the second time when you came into it with that whole other mindset of just being in control, being in the moment, how do you control those thoughts, emotions, and get rid of some of that noise that just gets in the way of performance?
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, just even the recognition that if we're experiencing pressure, that means that my attention is on the consequences. Just that awareness. I mean, it all starts with awareness. I got to be aware that I'm experiencing pressure. And then with this knowledge that, okay, well, where that pressure is coming from is my attention to the consequences. With that awareness, I can then shift my attention. Okay, but what's important right now? Yes, that's the outcome that I want. And I realize that the consequences associated with it are what they are. But I want to create conditions for me to achieve the objective that I've set out to achieve as much as I can. So, what now? What right now, in this moment, can I do? And that varies depending on the different tasks. There are physical things we can do, like I mentioned some of them, in terms of breathing or just a body position, where just what we're doing with our bodies really is the physical. The mental, where should our mind be? What should we be paying attention to? What type of perspective should we be taking? An optimistic one, leaning into the possibility that this is an actual opportunity that we have rather than a threat. That's a huge change for the mental side. Is the approaching situations, no matter what they are or no matter what the consequences are, as opportunities for us. Maybe it's an opportunity for us to demonstrate knowledge that we have or demonstrate capabilities that we've practiced, or an opportunity for us to just experience something new or to try something we haven't done. Again, it's however we define opportunity, we have to see the situation as an opportunity. So that's a mental piece. And then that emotional piece, sometimes, and this can kind of lead us into stress if you want, the emotional side of things. What feelings do we want in this performance situation? What emotions will help drive us in the direction we want to go, that will help facilitate performance rather than hold it back? And why I say this matches up with stress is because sometimes in these situations, our heart rate increases, our breathing increases, it becomes more rapid, our muscle tension changes, we might experience sweating. And all of these things are sometimes perceived as stress. We name them stress. These are stress reactions. And when we think about those reactions as stress, well, then the other cognitive piece of stress starts to come in too, which based on the model that I really like in terms of stress, it's called the transactional model of stress. Stress is two things. It comes from two places. One is we perceive a situation as a threat, not an opportunity, as a threat. And the second thing is we believe that we have insufficient resources to deal with that threat. So we think something bad might happen to us and we don't have what it takes to handle it well. That's where stress comes from. And so when we perceive situations as a threat, the sympathetic nervous system activates, the heart rate increases, the muscle tension changes, all those physiological changes that I just said happen, and we name it stress. But here's the thing. If we look at the situation as an opportunity, now, because the consequences matter, because we're motivated, because this is important, because it's an opportunity, the sympathetic nervous system will also activate. We will still feel that increase in muscle tension, the increase in breathing rate, the increase in heart rate. But now we can name it excitement or joy, because physiologically, those emotions produce the same things going on in our body that what we name stress or anxiety or nervousness. So it really comes down to how we label those feelings and the perception that we have of the situation. So how can we eliminate stress and pressure? One is look at the situation as an opportunity to recognize the resources that we have to bear: physical, mental, emotional, social resources. Know what we have to bring, and then bring it in what way? Well, whatever way right now in this present moment is a task relevant way that will help facilitate performance. If we do those things, we will eliminate stress, we will eliminate pressure, and we will create conditions for us to be at our best in that moment. Call it the zone, call it flow, call it whatever you want. But in that situation, in that moment where we experience that full engagement in what's happening, stress and pressure are gone. And anybody who's ever been in the zone or in flow or in that full engaged state knows exactly what I'm talking about. There is no pressure in that moment. There is no stress. It can't exist. So we have to create those conditions for ourselves. And to get back to your question where you just were, is how do we do that? It starts with self-awareness. It really begins there.
That's great stuff, Brian. And I can relate to so much of it in so many ways, including, getting ready to do this podcast today, and virtually everyone I do. I've done a number of them now, but still there's that bit of I refer to it as anxiety sometimes. Is the camera going to work? Is all the equipment going to work? Am I fully prepared to do this? Am I going to look like a fool or sound like an idiot? Okay, I'm used to that. But pushing on beyond that, all of that other stuff that comes in, and over the years, I've tried to reassure myself that this is the extra energy, adrenaline, excitement, energy, enthusiasm that I need to do this well.
Yeah, and that's really the approach. I mean, all the things that you just mentioned are great things because you might be worried about them, but they are task relevant things. So for you to put your attention on, okay, right now, well, the one thing you said was, you said I'm worried about looking stupid or sounding stupid or whatever it is. So that's a consequence. Like if you screw this up, then that's a consequence. You look stupid. Maybe. I mean, you're assuming that you know what other people are going to think and how they're going to think and how they're going to judge you. And we usually, I don't know, we can be pretty bad at that sometimes. We tend to make things worse in our minds than they actually are. But that of what you said was that's a consequence. We got to get our attention off of that. So what we want to do is do well because that will avoid that consequence we don't want. What do we need to do in order to do well? Well, double check the technology, double check the camera, double check the sound stuff. Make sure that that our energy activation levels are where they need to be. Make sure that our focus and attention is on the knowledge and the whatever it is, given the circumstances that we need in order to be at our best. So all of those things are task relevant. They keep you in the moment. They are productive, and they will eliminate the stress and pressure.
Great stuff. You've got more on it. What's the deal with the change? I know you mentioned something in there about the change, and I know you've been working and involved in a project with that name.
Oh yeah, there was a book that I contributed a chapter to, and the book is called The Change. And the book, or the chapter that I wrote, was on resilience, and really it's centered around a lot of what we're talking about right now, which is if we are going to be resilient, if we are going to create conditions for us to experience life, whether we label it good or bad, and learn and grow and thrive as a result of our experiences, we need three things. And it begins with self-awareness. That's the first. We need to be aware of what we're thinking, what we're feeling, how we're interacting with others, uh, and I mean, just aware of all the things that are around us. And then once we have that awareness, then we can shift to the next part, which is acceptance. And that's just simply accepting what is, not accepting it in the sense of like resigning ourselves to this is our fate, this is just how it is, but acceptance of this is my reality right now. I mean, I can label it good or bad or like it or not or pleasant or unpleasant, whatever it is. It just is. This is it. This is where I am. And with that acceptance, we have the ability to then move forward to action. And acceptance is critical though, because often we will rationalize things, we will gloss things over, or just flat out ignore stuff that we don't like. And none of that's productive. We need to just take a very clear, honest look at our circumstances, accept them as they are, and then we can take action. And by action, I mean whatever it is that we can do to either sustain the things that are going well, because we need to be aware of those too, and to change the things that aren't. And so resilience, just well-being and thriving, flourishing in general, I think it all begins with awareness, understand, like just being aware of how we are, accepting our circumstances just honestly, and then taking productive action based on whatever analyses we've done.
Very cool. Seems like we have a number of challenges ahead of us at this point, or maybe it's just me. But the change sounds like a great read, Brian, and your chapter on resilience in particular. And from previous interviews, I have enjoyed Begin Again many times to start my day. Just a nice little chapter or two to get your brain in the right place to get going.
I appreciate that. Yeah, that's the whole intent. It's not a long read. Each one is very short, but they're relevant for a lot of people in a lot of situations. And you know what? If they aren't relevant today, they might be tomorrow. So that's why, picking it up. It's interesting because I'll pick it up myself sometimes and just thumb through the pages, and I know what I was thinking or what was going on in my life when I wrote it, but often I'll realize, well, this applies now in a whole different way that it didn't before. I've just got different things going on, but this is still a relevant piece of information, and it's great to remind myself of.
Speaking of going on, what are you working on stunt wise, stunt coordinator wise? Anything that we can look forward to seeing you in? A truck rolling
Well,
out the back
yeah,
of
well,
it?
that Righteous Gemstones episode hasn't aired yet. That one's coming out in season 4. I worked on the new Superman movie. That's supposed to come out sometime this year, maybe the summertime, I guess.
Okay.
There's another movie I doubled Nick Offerman. The movie was called Sovereign. Doubled him in that, and that's, I think the last I heard, was coming out in March. So those are, Stranger Things was another episode of Stranger Things in the new season that I worked on. So yeah, there
Cool.
there are a few different things coming out.
Busy guy. We love it, and glad that you made time for us today to kind of help us maybe level our game up and move past some of the uh, stress and other things that get in the way of us being in the zone.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, stress and pressure, they are, again, they're ubiquitous. People talk about them all the time, and they talk about them like they really understand what they are and how they are. There are a lot of assumptions around these different feelings, and I think that it really would benefit a lot of people to just, I don't know, think about it a little bit differently. Like we were just talking about, the stress, it really is about the situation and how we're perceiving it. If we don't see a situation as a threat, we're not going to experience stress. And pressure, if we can keep our attention off of the consequences and on the things that will make it more likely that the consequences will be what we want, well, we won't experience pressure there either. So it really is something that it's important for people to understand that stress and pressure are not inevitable. We don't have to experience them, and they're not helpful. That's
Yeah.
another thing I hear a lot is no, you don't get it, man. I perform really well under stress and pressure. Like that's what I need. I need that to get myself going and to keep me focused and get myself ready. And to that I say, no, you don't. What they're doing for you is boosting what's called arousal. And that's that energy activation level. That's our pumped upness. And we do need a certain amount of pumped upness to perform well in whatever situation we find ourselves. And stress and pressure, because they activate the sympathetic nervous system, contribute to that pumped upness. But because of what they do to us psychologically and emotionally, they are not the best way to get to that level of arousal that we want. There are plenty of others, and those are the ones that we should pursue. So, are you performing well as a result of stress and pressure? No, I would say you're performing well in spite of stress and pressure.
There you go. You've got a new website, don't you?
It's brianhiteglobal.com. Yes, I do. I went through a little rebrand thing to focus on the high stakes environments rather than just working with athletes and performers. Now I'm working with corporate, I'm working with first responders, I'm working with educators, as well as athletes and performers. And specifically within that high stakes performance environment, that high stakes realm where again, I'll never argue with anybody that the consequences matter because I've been in situations where truly if I didn't do it right, myself or somebody else may not go home, and that's always the goal. So I understand what those situations are like. And so the way that I approach stuff is not about you're blowing it out of proportion. The consequences aren't as bad as what you think they are, although sometimes we do.
Mhm.
But that's not the assumption. The assumption is no, you truly are in a situation where the stakes are really high. So what are we going to do? How do you create conditions where you can be at your best consistently? Let's work that. So
Let's
that's what
get
I
it.
do. All of that's on brianhiteglobal.com. Yeah.
All right, and that's Hite, Brian Hite. And obviously global goes to your, quest for world dominance or something.
I just hope to work all around the globe. That's the point.
There you
I
go.
love to travel, happy to go anywhere. So
Yeah.
yeah, so the keynote speaking, the workshops, all of those things, have suitcase, we'll travel. That's how that
All
goes.
right. Fantastic. Brian, thanks again for your time. We appreciate it. BrianHiteGlobal.com if you want to reach out and find out more about what Brian's doing and resources available to help you along the way. For other podcasts in this series and everything employment in North Central Illinois, there's just one place to go. That's nciworks.org.